Welcome, everyone. Welcome. We are live at Punish for Protecting live video broadcast today, and we are live with special guests and a very special show today about the motherless home. This is being aired on Punished No More and Free to Protect, as well as Punished for Protecting News Network on Facebook, and I'm happy to say on CPS News Network. And we thank our special person who has CPS News Network, Danny McGowan, today for allowing us to use this platform. My name is Francesca Amato, and I am your host today. And I'm going to be doing a show today called The Motherless Home and the Dangers of the Motherless Home. We're going to be talking with two very special guests. We have today with us, we have Victoria Gribbin, LMSW and ADA forensic expert, and Dorothy Hill, global consultant, compliance and anti-money laundering expert, as far as well as someone who formerly worked at Goldman Sachs. So this should be a very interesting show today. We're going to be talking about the motherless home. Everyone talks about the fatherless home, and I am obviously against any fatherless home whereby a father is a supportive father who loves his children, protects his children, cares about his children. Of course, we support that 100%. But we found that there is a danger that's been happening in our country and abroad for many decades now, and people haven't really talked about it, and they haven't really realized that there's been just so much deception out there. There's been so much just wrong teachings and pointing at a fatherless home. Setting off a deception that the courts are only giving children to mothers. And, you know, when I think of that, which I'll talk about today with my guests, when I think of that, it really concerns me. And you're going to see why that concerns me and why this is such a serious topic. I have to always ask myself, as a domestic violence expert myself, why any father would want sole custody of children and take them away from loving, caring mothers that love their children, mothers that don't have a domestic violence history, mothers that don't have a drug abuse history or alcoholism or a criminal record. We have to ask ourselves, society has to ask themselves why fathers would want to take sole custody of children. I have a problem with that. I have a very serious problem with that, doing this now over 14 years. And so I'm going to bring on my guests. Now, I do believe that my one guest, Vicki, does not have a video today. So we're going to show some photographs and so on, so you can see who Vicki is and learn more about Vicki. And I do have my guest, Dorothy Hill, who you'll be able to see her. But in the meanwhile, I'm just going to let this go a little bit while people are joining. There is a comment section, so you can comment away. I will do my best to read your comments, and I may not be able to respond now, but I can hopefully respond later. So we do have people that are also viewing the comments, and if there's anything that I see like a bunch of, I will try to touch on that as well. On my YouTube channel, which is Punished No More and Free to Protect, which is part of Punished for Protecting Incorporated, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that bell icon so that you do not ever miss a new program that's coming up, a new broadcast. Likewise, on Facebook, you can go to Punished for Protecting. It's the number 4 news, and you can go ahead and follow us there. And of course, follow us here on CPS News Network, who's allowing us to use this wonderful split platform. So again, thank you so much. And today's topic again is the dangers of a motherless home. And I'm going to bring out my first guest right now, Dorothy Price Hill. Dorothy Hill, she is a global she's a global, well, let me just add her to the stream here while I try to do this. She's a global consultant, compliance and anti-money laundering expert, if you will, and former employee of Goldman Sachs. Dorothy, hi and welcome
Hi.
today. It's nice to have you. So can you touch a little bit about your background first before we get started on this subject? And
Sure, absolutely. So I'm a mom of two amazing twins, age 20, and we moved to Long Island in the summer of 2007. I had gone to Dartmouth undergrad, that's up in New Hampshire, then got my MBA at NYU Stern in finance and technology. After having consulted with McKinsey in Germany, because I speak fluent German, I then went back to Goldman Sachs, where I had been a summer intern and stayed with them for about 6.5 years, but all international until the very end. So Tokyo, assignments in Frankfurt. I worked a bit in our Paris office in commercial real estate. But my job was really credit risk management. And during those years at Goldman, I really honed my skills in due diligence. And we'll get a little bit later to why that background is so important as we delve into, what I consider to be a criminal enterprise of Department of Social Services, CPS, together with the courts and the various legal entities and individuals who support the ongoing criminal activity, not just in our country, other countries as well, like Australia, UK, etc.
yes, and today, our main topic is going to be on discussing domestic violence, primarily domestic violence against women and children, and how that's connected.
Mm-hmm.
Also bringing out forensic expert Vicki Gribbin as well, but also the fact that I titled this today, the dangers of a motherless home. And one of the things that I was talking about was, that of course people concerned about the fatherless home, of course, but where this scale has just heavily weighed to giving custody to abusive fathers, and or the system itself and the dangers that the system causes, which I know that would be where you can put your expertise, in. And I'd like you to kind of touch on that, if you don't mind, Dorothy. Maybe first starting a little bit more with an emphasis on the system itself and the dangers and how that exasperates domestic violence and so on.
So, part of my background in money laundering investigations is a big part of it's compliance. So, compliance with laws, regulations. It could be a New York State regulation on cybersecurity, data privacy that the banks, broker dealers, and any entities involved in Bitcoin have to comply with. It could be even broader, like the Fed, the regulation of banks. But in particular, this pertains really more to government corruption, right? So because Department of Social Services is a federal agency, each state has its respective, social services function. It does everything from child welfare, child abuse and neglect investigations, to providing assistance to people like SNAP, food, heating assistance, and also child support enforcement, which does include, in my case, in identifying where the father of the child or children has basically fled to. I came into this whole process when my husband, father of my twins, moved overseas to London, and then didn't tell us where he was after that. He'd actually moved to Dubai. So I went through an entire case in New York County, Manhattan, where we had lived at the time. And because we could not find what's called a verified home address, my case was dropped. The arrears that he actually owes me, it's over $800,000 now. I wrote to Governor Cuomo. I got the State Department involved. I actually used their policies against them. I said, here it stipulates that if a parent, in many cases, it's mostly fathers because they're the usually the breadwinners. But in this case, I went to our local county here in Long Island after I'd moved here and said, look, the policy here states that you have to use the parent locator to find my ex-husband and help me collect the child support that is due, for my twins who are attending a public school and all the extra expenses like summer camp and having a nanny or house sitter if I had to go away on business, for example. And I wasn't in a position financially to just stay at home. I'm not a trust fund kid. And that was really my first foray into this system, and really seeing firsthand when I moved to Long Island how corrupt it is and how many of the people just don't care. They go to their job, they may have their paycheck, and they either don't care, they're not trained properly. And in many cases, it's actually outright the way to consider malice towards the protective parent, which was definitely in a second case I have now in the courts, where I won the first trial in February 2020. And I know you were really instrumental in helping me on that. Vicki Gribbin, who's on the program today, she was one of my witnesses. But wow, what a journey it's been, I have to say, since really going back for me, 2005, and my attempts to collect child support from my ex-husband, who had basically fled the United States to avoid an arrest warrant, avoid being arrested, had another family that I sort of had to find out about through other means. But yes, that was, in a short synopsis, that was stage one. Stage two is actually much worse, involving outright corruption and child trafficking that I am currently exposing through my case as a petitioner here in Long Island.
It's mind blowing, and the more we bring people on, and like we have more pieces to the puzzle. Like now I've been interviewing and working very closely with Megan Walsh, who's the daughter of John Walsh of Missing and Exploited Children, and how it's tied together. I've been also working with I don't know if you got to see him, but I also had Lewis Arthur, who's a minister and advocate for human trafficking victims, and he works closely at the border, and he's been literally protecting children from, I will be doing another interview with him, as a matter of fact, but he's been protecting children from the cartel, and now protecting women and children from the family court, because we call that the cartel too. And it is all tied together. So missing and exploited children, all of this, CPS, ACS, Department of Social Services, everything that you've been researching, everything that you've been investigating, what I've been doing, and just tying it all together, seeing that this is one big giant child trafficking industry, and they try to silence you through narcissism. They try to silence you until, like, it's the same thing that an abuser would do. It's the same characteristic that an actual abuser would do to their victim. This entire business, this whole family court CPS business, is doing the same thing. If you start to talk out about it, you're either crazy, you have untreated mental illness, suddenly you have suddenly are a sovereign citizen.
Yeah.
You suddenly are, whatever they want, like a cult, they'll say all the things, and it's actually a form of projection onto the people that actually are educated, articulate, sane, normal people that cannot believe this is happening. And what we did is we delved in and found out why it's happening. Why would you give children to abusers? There's got to be a reason,
right? And when I moved to Long Island, I married a man who had been a former choir boy, and I never ran a background check on him. I noticed that his ex-wife was sort of tiptoeing around me, and I wanted to get to know her because I was becoming the stepmother of her two children. And it wasn't until 2011, Fran, where I found a box of secret documents in his closet, went through it, and realized that he had used my MBA, my six-figure salary working at a private equity firm as head of investor relations, my Ivy League degree, my credentials, to literally steal the children from their mother. Now, it was more than just not wanting to pay child support. It was extreme control. And it wasn't until I experienced, from 2007 until a culminating event during, he strangled me to the point of asphyxiation in a rage. I had blockaded the bedroom door. I said, "You're drunk, don't come near me." But having been strangled and my life almost taken from me, that was the point at which I knew, I need to get away from this person. I was already planning my escape, by the way. I was coming up with a new home and putting all the finances together. But finding those documents in the closet about, wow, he went to court. It was 5:30 at night, Fran. Tell me which court in New York State stays open till 5 p.m. After 5 p.m., I should say. No, the magistrate, Dorothy Phillips, stayed late with his attorneys, and he presented and then suddenly got custody of 2 boys, and this was all done behind my back. I was not invited to participate. So then I realized I was definitely used. He targeted me because I was really what they call the cover girl. I made him look good. He had a long history of abuse against women that I did not find out until later. One was an NYPD officer he had dated, stole her badge, did horrific abuse to his first wife in Wantagh, New York. But that's all part of my massive, massive federal case that's going to be going. First stage goes before the courts next week, and then thereafter. But yes, coercive control, domestic violence of all types. For me, I wasn't sexually abused and sexually assaulted, but I have so much empathy for the women who are. And we have to do much more in terms of educating people about domestic violence. These abusers are usually high-level individuals within our society. In the case of my second husband, he's a banker. He's a very powerful banker here on Long Island with serious political connections that have allowed him to get away with many of his crimes until now. I used to say to him, "What are you doing marrying a Goldman Sachs analyst? I can go through all the financials. I can document everything for the investigators." And he sort of looked at me and gave me a blank stare. I always thought, he thought he was smarter than I was. He said I didn't have street smarts, but that's untrue. My dad was an international pilot with TWA. I've been to 30 countries. I lived in 5 countries. I am very fine-tuned in terms of street smarts.
Well, and I'm so glad, when my guests speak on the different subjects that they speak on, because it kind of takes away from what people think or what they've been programmed to think, because a lot of people think that this just happens to really poor people or uneducated people. No, this evil doesn't care who it attacks and whom it goes after. First of all, everybody's valuable, but what I'm saying is everybody has a value to them. And I emphasize this a lot because, I've had clerks in the court say, well, these people, if they don't have any money, what in the world how can we be getting money off of them? Well, you are, because you're getting it. And this is where you come in. They're getting it off of federal funding. They're getting it off of all kinds of ways, okay, that they're getting money. Which I'm going to have you touch on, but I'm going to bring out I'm just going to bring out Vicki so we can have this conversation amongst us. Let me just introduce her. Vicki Gribbin, licensed master's degree social worker with a forensic expert in Americans with Disability Act. And let me go ahead and bring her in, add her to the stream. Hopefully she's here. Vicki, are you there on the line?
Yes. Hi, Fran. Hi, Dorothy.
Hello.
Thank you for having me. Okay, I'll introduce myself, but I just wanted to say that Dorothy's case is an example that is profoundly applicable to, and more common than people would think, of the state of today's family courts in every state. And family courts are basically civil courts that decide child custody and other matters relating to family law. And the horrors that go on, the corruption, the lawlessness is you can just hear it by what she just said about her case. And I've seen it many times. Okay, I am a licensed New York State social worker and a retired New York City police officer. And as a social worker, social workers promote social and legal justice. They advocate for clients who belong to marginalized groups, those that are at risk for discrimination. And what a forensic social worker does, it's a specific area of expertise that applies social work principles and issues that relate to laws and legal systems. So forensic social workers engage in activities within their area of competence and expertise, applying the law specifically to advocate for their clients for their issue in family court. My areas of expertise are the ADA, specifically Title II, which applies to state courts. The ADA is a comprehensive civil rights federal law that protects individuals with disabilities. And it's also in the area of domestic violence, in particular coercive control, which is the most prevalent and devastating type of domestic violence, that family courts and matrimonial courts don't recognize as a matter of law based on state law. And trying to create reforms, because criminal domestic violence is recognized, which occurred in the 1970s. But to this day, it remains in judges' discretion, and attorneys don't submit case facts when it comes to the relevance of coercive control, economic, psychological, emotional abuse of mothers and children when it comes to custody and other cases.
Yeah, absolutely. And you know, that's why both of you are so important to today's live feed, where we're emphasizing on the dangers of the motherless home. And I'd like you both to kind of touch on that subject and why that's so dangerous, and why they've been targeting mothers, and they've had this false narrative that they've been going after fathers. And the truth of the matter is that that's been a deception. It's even been propagated by churches, in which I am a strong Christian. I believe my father is God. So, Father God, I am pro man. I am not anti father or men in any way, shape, or form. It's been such a deception. And I'm going to ask everybody, when each person speaking, just to make sure you mute, because it does bring an awful backfeed and it hurts the video, just so you guys know. And I'll try to do the same. But I feel like this is, you know, three people here, you know, now there's myself, you know, I've been advocating for now, gosh, I can't believe that it's pushing 14 and a half years. 14 and a half years. And what I've learned throughout the years, and, you know, Vicki, you've been like so instrumental in training me in the Americans with Disability Act. And I've learned from you, but how it's all incorporated together, and, you know, what it's doing, you know, what they're doing, how they're causing these psychological injuries, how they're, we're seeing more and more now, thank God, we're seeing more and more where people are not stigmatized, or you know, put down because there's some type of a psychological injury, no different than you would treat somebody if they were run over by a car. You wouldn't chalk down to them or treat them bad because they've been physically injured. So why would you do that to somebody who's been psychologically injured, emotionally injured, because you're fearful of the damages that they're causing, especially women and children? What I've learned throughout the years is that no father that's a good father, that loves their children, would ever take the children, no good father, no non-abusive father, this is your key way to find out who they are, would ever take sole custody from a loving mother, a good mother. Now, I've had dads which they've had to protect their children from a mother who has issues that you and I would want to protect the children from, that woman too. And they do it. I got to tell you, these men, they don't like to have to do it. Okay. I've talked to them. I've met them. I've worked with them, and it hurts their heart to take away the mother. Okay. And we need to really, really build up women again. I'm not talking about this women's liber, I hate men attitude. I'm talking about women that love a healthy father figure, husband figure, believe in men, strong, good men. But enough of this abusive man, fathers that are abusing children sexually, emotionally, and physically, and financially, right? And then the courts, CPS, ACS, all of this, not protecting the women and children, okay? Not protecting them at all. If anything, hurting them further, wounding them further, and causing more harm. And these women are literally, their heads are spinning, going, I don't know what I did wrong. I don't know what I did wrong. We cannot think any other way but to protect our children. It's built in us, right? So Vicki, can you kind of touch on that and just hit unmute when?
Oh, do you want me to hit mute, you said?
No, I'm sorry. When someone else is speaking, hit mute and then hit unmute when you speak.
Oh, okay. Yes, you're right on the money with everything you just said. The fact is that coercive control exists in all forms of domestic violence, physical and all, economic, legal abuse. And the key is that when it comes to contested litigation, if you're dealing with a man, I mean, it's a very small percentage of women. The reason I'm making this about men is that the empirical research confirms that when it comes to domestic violence, that the majority of victims or targeted victims in the court system are women. There are women that target men, like you said, but it's a very, very small percentage. And what happens is when you go into this contested litigation, the problem lies in that it becomes a he said, she said. And everyone knows that, again, intimate partner violence is committed primarily against women. Okay. And it is up to the court system to ensure that the women's civil rights are protected in the context of their family court orders and their, matrimonial court orders. And what happens is, again, the research confirms that economic abuse, especially, is like often worse than the physical effects of domestic violence, and it includes, fear, anxiety. It impacts the development of children. Their ACE scores go up. And what's happening is that the courts are not legally required to protect against domestic violence in these orders, unless it's physical, egregious violence. So what's happening is, if a man wants to take away custody of a woman, if he doesn't want to comply with his economic orders, like in Dorothy's case where he leaves the country, the courts won't do anything about it. I've seen this so many times. Not that they leave the country, but where they refuse to pay. Yet, if a woman does something, a mother, to protect her children, she is immediately, villainized and held accountable, incarcerated, even if she doesn't comply and cooperate. So there is definitely gender bias in these court systems. And from an ADA perspective, what I'd like to say is that Title II, all right, courts do not exist in a bubble where only state law applies. We all know that the 14th Amendment applies, right? That all persons similarly situated should be treated alike. And if not, in the policies and practices and laws that are applied, that's considered discrimination against women. So the overlap between domestic violence that is allowed, legal abuse in custody cases and contested divorce cases, overlaps that, which is a constitutional violation, and it also overlaps the ADA. So what I would like to emphasize to your audience is that to always remember that the ADA applies, which is a protection for people with disabilities, and you need to look at the definition that the Department of Justice publishes online, that the definition of a disability could be cancer. It could be depression, OCD, ADD, many things. And these women, mothers, are protected class members that the government, like you said, courts are causing disabilities by not protecting them against coercive control, legal abuse, and domestic violence in the context of orders that's not physical. Taking away custody, not enforcing economic orders. Law guardians come in and they do assessments that they're not even qualified to do them in many cases. And there's a lot of bias in the system with that. So since the ADA rule of law applies, it's another form of discrimination. So if you are a domestic violence victim targeted in the court system by an abuser that you have a child with or that you're divorcing, to remember that the ADA applies and to request that the court enforce, not violate Title II of the ADA, which it's a scientifically proven fact that coercive control via custody orders or judgment of divorce orders violates civil rights and liberties, but it also violates the ADA. And emotional, psychological, verbal, and financial abuse increases people who are already at risk due to their sensitive or the way their central nervous system operates. And it produces toxic chronic stress that causes debilitating symptoms. And then, like Fran said, you appear, oh, well, she's unstable. Well, she's unfit and he's calm. So that's a big part of the problem. And
I've seen that, not to interrupt you, but I've seen that so many times where the mother will be all emotional because, first of all, think about this. You would go into a panic, fright and flight when you know your child is a judge is about to order your child into danger, and then that narcissist is as calm as a cucumber. He's as calm as a cucumber. And let's face it, the bottom line is that they're working together with the court. They're working together. I see the wink, wink, nod, nod. I mean, my goal is to abolish arrest. Say it again, Vicki.
Absolutely. I've seen it in almost every case I've ever advocated in. I've seen it and I've seen it personally. Yes.
Yeah. And my goal has always been to abolish arrest. That is my goal. My goal is about to go on steroids soon because we have to do something. Children are being taken left, right, and center. Mothers are in hiding because of the dangers. They cannot protect their children. I wanted to talk a little more. I wanted to have Dorothy, if you could, and just please don't forget to mute in between. Dorothy, if you could touch again on touch more on the financial aspects of what they're doing, because it's follow the money, right? Follow the money. This is what's happening.
Yes. So in my particular case, follow the money, a little bit difficult because my ex-husband is very savvy with, Bitcoin and having gone to Russia. It lives in the UAE, Dubai. I've had offers from law firms and other investigators to help me. So I have a quite demanding job, working in financial services. I do compliance. But this case is important to me. It's really for my children. My children are juniors in college. This situation really adversely impacted my son in particular. And so, we're really making, I'd say, great strides in helping to get him back on track. He's such a great, both of my children are amazing, beautiful, sweet children with empathy and caring about others, which is really, I think a reflection of my strong family and upbringing. But in terms of the money, yes. So I'll give you an example about the power structure. So, when I divorced my second husband because of domestic violence, I gave evidence to the judge of the police reports. He pushed me down the stairs. It was a police report. He threatened to call CPS and tell them I abandoned my children when I took the dog for a walk. I was actually getting a little too close to some of the things that he was doing behind my back. So that was his way of, turning up the control on me and threats. And I have all the threats in writing. Obviously, I'm working with law enforcement now. But the bottom line is that I started tracing the money. I started looking at detail. I always tell people, if you're in a domestic violence situation, whatever you can do, do not settle. Do not mediate your divorce. You have to litigate. And the reason is it gives you power to collect the financials, the bank accounts, brokerage statements, investments, especially, those more highly contentious. It really wasn't say have to look again and again that I started following the money of suspicious transactions. I had asked my husband, where does $60,000 of marital funds go? Why do you have a combination in your wallet for a safety deposit box? Why are you associating with these people who are in the news for crimes committed here on Long Island? But I think for me, the clincher was when the district attorney of Suffolk County, Thomas Spoda, who's a Democrat, walked into my divorce pretrial before Judge Leonard Steinman in Mineola, that's Nassau County Supreme Matrimonial, and sat right.
Come out and come back in. Oh, there you are. There you are. Go ahead.
Mm-hmm. So the district attorney, who's now in federal jail for at least 4 years, came into the courtroom in summer 2013 during our pretrial and sat right to the left of my then estranged husband. Then I knew that not only did my ex-husband have very powerful contacts, but it really was the clincher that if you think about an organization chart, right? How are people related to each other? I knew that he had worked for a particular bank. I knew that he had worked with a particular person who was really not properly investigated by Suffolk County Police as it pertains to human trafficking and murder. And then I started connecting the even more powerful dot. So really, it's the legal system. It's the certain members of the police. And for the record, I back the blue. I come from a military family. My grandfather was served, and my father was U.S. Navy fighter pilot or pilot, just pilot. And the training. I have many friends in law enforcement, but it's really those individuals within law enforcement who are corrupt who make it bad for everyone else. And we do have a level of corruption here.
Well, and let's talk about that, because now, when Minister Lewis comes back on, he's finding more and more, and I back the blue too, to a sense, but less and less now. And boy, oh boy, our New York police officers, Ulster County, Long Island, and we can just go on and on. The corruption, it's like it's not what we hoped it would be. Let's put it that way. So I think that's another area, is that they play on good people, innocent people that back an authoritative order. Okay. And it's not that we're against an authoritative order. Okay. We went before judges thinking they were going to be fair and just, and they're not. They're corrupt and evil. CPS and ACS and all of this corrupt, evil, multi-trillion-dollar industry that's not protecting, not following the oath, not protecting people, lying to us, violating the Constitution, violating all of the laws, violating the federal codifications, violating the federal laws. As we know, the Thomas Valva case, that was a police officer father that murdered his own son in a whole, what I believe to be a child trafficking on steroids case. The judges, I mean, they're all covering up. It's disgusting. It's absolutely disgusting. I mean, it can't get more vile. And Ann, here's a comment here. Can you wrap your head around this corruption? No, we cannot wrap our head around this corruption. It is absolutely vile.
Fran,
absolutely disgusting. Yeah.
And what greatest source of money laundering around the globe? People. It's bribery. Corruption and bribery. When we think about Hunter Biden, think about Ukraine and the threats, to our local level, where officials are call a VIG. Well, I was trained at Goldman Sachs and an MBA from NYU. We did not call it a VIG. That's organized crime term. So that, again, another red flag. But yes, absolutely, the corruption, the money laundering, envelope, brown envelope. I'll pay for one private school, or I'll pay for your country club dues. Are going on behind the scenes, and the only way to prove it with evidence, and this is Vicky's world too, where our two worlds combine, not collide, but combine, is to follow the money and prove the money transfers. Prove it. It's hard, as I mentioned, transfers of money, brown traditional, but or with all the records we have, it's easy to track. More judges go down as they prove that bribes were paid to them. Because how can a judge, for sake of argument, $90,000 upstate New York, be living a lifestyle, lavish lifestyle, has a yacht, has an apartment in Manhattan?
If I could interject and add to that,
a Goldman Sachs wife is maybe a nurse. So a lot of it's forensic investigation.
Go ahead, Vicky.
Okay, what Dorothy said is absolutely right. Okay, first of all, contested cases, the goal is to settle and not reach trial. And so what lawyers do is they churn the case. And even if you, like she said, she advises go to trial to prove your case, and that she's absolutely right, but they don't allow it. And in the meantime, the lawyers will make so much money just churning the case. Then they go behind closed doors. The judges don't know there's no transparency. The judges don't know the facts of the case, and the facts of the case determine the issues and the outcome and what law is applied. Okay. And the corruption is pervasive in the police department, which I know firsthand, and unfortunately that's true. It's but more pervasive in the court system. Okay. I know even in my case, you had there was fraud, and when I insisted on going on trial, 3 attorneys refused. After paying $300,000 in legal fees, I said I would go pro se, and when I did, I wanted to prove fraud. I said the F word. That was the beginning of the end. They hired a receiver so that I could not prove my case. They would not release money, so that my appeal ability expired. I never really had an appeal. I just kept on asking for continuances. And then at the end, the receiver was paid out of my home equity, our joint marital home equity, $180,000, atop real estate brokers to sell the house and to list it. All of my rights were stripped. I had no say over the price of the house, who purchased it, the broker. I asked if I could purchase one of the homes when sold. They said no, only if he agrees. And that violates New York state law and the Constitution and equitable distribution laws. And they paid the receiver and the law and the judges, the attorneys, almost 500,000. And then less than a year later, the receiver closed her private practice partnership and became an assistant to a judge in Nassau County Court, across from matrimonial court. She closed a very difficult case, and that's just another example of the corruption that goes on.
Yeah, and it's so, like, we know that, we know what they're doing, okay? And the thing is that, and that's why I can't wait to have, more coming from what Minister Lewis, pardon me, Minister Lewis, I want to get the right last name here, I have it in my notes here. It's not showing up for some reason. Oh, Arthur, Minister Lewis Arthur, because they're at the border and they're saving all these children from the drug cartel and the child trafficking cartel. But it is the same thing. Family court, CPS, all of this is the same thing. So obviously the damages, you as a forensic ADA expert, licensed social worker, you understanding how the money is not in compliance, and how the money is, being used, and so on and so forth. All the crime and the corruption. But the point is that the damages to society, to society's children, to our country, is astronomical. I mean, it's astronomical. And yes, they want to settle because they want to cover up their crimes and not get it on the record, even though the record's fake anyway. And as we know, like, even when we go up to the federal court and when we're doing like Americans with Disability Act court cases and constitutional violation court cases, I've learned, and you guys can kind of support me on this, I've seen that they don't even understand the ADA in the federal court. They don't have ADA attorneys, okay? They don't understand the ADA. So how can they be a federal court to defend your rights? It's so absurd, and it's so insane. The system is so, I mean, we say the word corrupt and people kind of take it like a grain of salt. The corruption is so dark and so deceiving. You talk about Hunter Biden, you talk about the Biden administration, Hillary Clinton, all of this child trafficking industry, John Walsh, missing and exploited. Of course, the damages are going to be off the wall. That's happening to your children and you and families, and rich or poor, black or white, it doesn't matter. Democrat or Republican, people are being destroyed. They're being destroyed. Dorothy?
Yeah, so I listened to that interview you did with her, and when she said she was holding a baby and her own mother pushed her, I thought that is despicable. I would never, tolerate that. My parents were so incredibly loving. And if that happens, in a situation, I speak to others and say, you need to find a productive, healthy way to deal with your anger, because, projecting your rage and anger onto someone using physical force. Self-defense is a different situation, or you're in a situation where there are drugs involved or your life is at risk. But one thing that I really wanted to drive home too is that the way the system, they basically grease the wheels, is they do favors. And now our former Nassau County executive, Ed Mangano, may be going to jail for 17 and a half years. Who knows what the final, I haven't been watching the news today, but it was around 17 years. You have Spoda in jail for federal jail 4 years.
Can you talk about Spoda a little bit? That's really, I meant to ask you, I already knew that he was in jail. I knew that we did a lot of notices of liability and affidavits of harm that I physically brought in myself, and they didn't want to even date stamp them and put them into the court. I mean, sorry, not the court, put them into the, at the district attorney's office. Right. But that's something that's working, guys. These notices of liability, affidavits of harm, they go on public record. We serve everybody, and we stranglehold them is basically what we're doing. We have to. Okay, I mean that in writing. I don't mean that in like physical. Okay, I'm not talking about physical abuse here. But what happened? Tell them, because that's very encouraging that the Long Island District Attorney is in jail. He's in prison, right?
Well, we have two counties here, Nassau County, Suffolk County. Suffolk County is the eastern part of Long Island, for those of you not familiar. And Thomas Spota really rose up in the ranks. He came from Brooklyn. He's a former prosecutor. He moved with his family to Mount Sinai in Suffolk County, became, the Suffolk County Attorney General, kept on going through the cycle. And he brought up with him through the ranks somebody by the name of Jimmy Burke, who came from, a smaller family. His brother is NYPD, I believe. Vicki, I don't know if he's retired or not. And Jimmy Burke was identified when he was 14 years old as part of a case out in the St. James, Smithtown area for the murder of Johnny Pius Jr. Rocks shoved down his throat, his bicycle, and he found hidden under leaves. There is a lot of information coming out about that murder that I'm not at liberty to discuss right now. But suffice to say that Thomas Spota, together with Christopher McPartland, they were sentenced by a federal, it was a jury, and the judge here in Central Islip, which is where the federal courts are for Eastern Long Island, Brooklyn and Central Islip. And he's now serving a 4-year sentence in Danbury. McPartland was sent to Texas, and the reason was massive obstruction of justice for impeding an investigation of Jimmy Burke beating up a young man who had in his possession, are you ready for this? Child porn on DVDs, a woman being tortured, live tortured on DVD, sex toys and other items in his duffel bag, his PAL duffel bag, which some people say may have been set up to pass around the kind of freaks. There are a lot of people into very extreme crimes. But the bottom line is, yes, Spota was prosecuted, sentenced, so was McPartland. And the connections of Spota to my divorce in 2013, again, short-term marriage, I was definitely targeted to be his cover girl. A lot of evidence coming out now about how Spota and Burke pulled the strings in the life of my twins and myself, starting around 2011, when I started to really connect the dots. And this is a massive investigation where we have now the FBI and Suffolk County Police with other investigators on a task force. But I'll leave it at that for now. There's a lot more coming down the pike. But yeah, they try to make you look crazy. I went through a 4-hour exam, Vicki, and Vicki knows this, and you may recall, Fran, with a woman who went to Columbia for her PhD, and she teaches at Dartmouth Medical School. And so I spent 4 hours with her going through my family history, having, gone to Dartmouth and working for Goldman Sachs. CIA tried to, I spent time with the CIA in Langley to be a what's called a covert analyst, to be sent to South America because I speak 2 languages other than English fluently. I decided not to work for the CIA, but instead worked for the Council on Foreign Relations in New York as an economics analyst and researcher. So I'm very familiar with the government at the federal level, state, but it was really in the trenches here on Long Island where we witnessed firsthand how corrupt these judges really are. And I read so many stories how similar corruption exists, whether it's Herkimer County, upstate New York, Albany, all over the country.
Herkimer County, Erie County, there's just been an investigation on this Dr. Nathanson. And it yielded no fruit, even though he called every single last mother's his diagnosis to each mother who I have normal, coherent conversations with pretty much on a daily basis. He labeled them all delusional. And so I was so upset that it yielded nothing. Like, they didn't take his license, and obviously we're going back in and we're going to get a real investigation on him. But so I turned around and I sent an email and I said, so you guys did an investigation on Dr. Nathanson. So are you saying that these mothers are delusional too? Because you're obviously saying they're delusional too if you support this. So now you're in trouble. And Vicki, can you touch on that? Because when a doctor that works for the court and doesn't work for the people, and I need mute on you guys, sorry. And then an investigation comes through. We got to laugh at these investigations. The FBI is investigating. The DOJ is investigating. Meanwhile, though, we all know that they are a part of it. They're a part of it. We just have to hope that there's some good people in the midst, but we know that they're a part of it because it is a multi-trillion-dollar child trafficking industry. It's a multi-trillion-dollar child trafficking industry. And if we don't get it, man, we better take the axe to the root that it's a multi-trillion-dollar child trafficking industry that's molesting and harming children and stealing them from you, we're never going to wake up. But
Yes.
Vicky, if you can kind of touch on this, like, how in the world does
Yes.
this doctor say that these mothers are delusional, and then they investigate and they don't find anything wrong with that when he's ripping children away from them for absolutely no reason whatsoever? No due
I'll tell you
process,
why.
that they don't
Yeah.
even understand that there's something called due process. Like, do people get it that you're supposed to have due process in court? They throw these words around like it means nothing. Please
Exactly,
help me.
exactly. Yes. I know I'm chomping at the bit here, and we all share your fierce passion and your outrage for this. Okay. The reason why these experts, court appointed experts, get away with it is because they're self-regulating. There is no regulation of their qualifications. They don't have to be evidence-based. They don't have to be. What they need is an evidence-based practice, multidisciplinary team, domestic violence expert, child development, aid Title II ADA, because by the way, the courts are causing, we know that domestic violence has short-term and long-term psychological consequences on victims and children. And the most prominent of these are PTSD. Okay. And when you experience the terror of losing your child, or you experience entrapment, or you experience the court just not giving you due process and then just trampling all over your rights and listening to these experts, that's what causes PTSD. And under the ADA, it is a Title II, is considered disability discrimination to treat someone in the court system. It's called the regarded as prong, okay, of the prohibitions against discrimination for state court, so Title II entities, which state courts are. You are not allowed to treat someone as having a perceived disability. So if they're saying that they're delusional, or you have bipolar disorder, which is you're a protected class member if you have that, they have to prove it, but they don't use what's called the Daubert standard of evidence, okay, which federal courts use and criminal courts use, because your liberties are at stake. You may go to prison, yet our liberties are at stake. Women get thrown in jail all the time for being accused of domestic violence when they were defending themselves, or based on lies, or not paying child support, or not complying with the law guardian or a receiver. Yet New York uses a Fry standard, which is outdated, and that's just it's a scientific expert testimony, but at a very, very low standard. So in my opinion, this all goes down to that we need national reform of the standard of proof that's required for facts in a case, and to have regulation, which Jacqueline Franchetti, as we all know, is working on, for forensic experts in custody cases with domestic violence, for them to be regulated, because they're not right now. This reminds me so much of what it was like when women didn't even have rights to their children. It took us 100 years for women to be able to actually men own their children back in the 1800s. Then women had mother rights. Then they had no domestic violence rights. Then it took us 100 years to get the right to vote. We need to have our rights when it comes to family court and matrimonial court. And again, the ADA overlaps. The laws don't exist in a bubble. Okay, so the way to go is they're violating the Constitution, these forensic experts, and they're violating the ADA. You see, I'm getting emotional. They're causing PTSD, they're causing depression, and they're saying people who don't have it are delusional. It's all violations of federal law and constitutional law.
That's right. And if you let me go back to, oh, sorry, I need to remove this, not exit the solo. If you defend your rights, they mock you. A lot of times they mock you in the court. And the rights are so evident and so clear. I mean, if they follow the law, okay, not like you say, the policies, practices, and procedures. If they follow the law, this would not be going on. This has been the most cynical, sinister, dark deception that I've ever seen. And I don't want to know anymore, to be honest with you. It's at that point where I don't even want to know anymore. Like, we have to do, go ahead, Dorothy. I see you're trying to speak. Hit unmute yourself if you can. I think you're muted, Dorothy.
I'm not muted.
There you go. Go.
No, I was saying, when you just talked to me about, I don't want to hear anymore, I do definitely hit some points where it's so horrific. When you read about the Valva case, or the same judge that I had, Ellen Greenberg, she took a 5-year-old girl from her mother because the mother was taking her daughter to the doctor for complaining about something that had happened. That's what we do as mothers. We take our children to the doctors, make sure they have all the proper medications. We stay home with them when they're sick, or we make sure that someone is, with a proper background check, stays with our children. This judge is like totally out of control, but that will all be coming out in my lawsuit. When we talk about the money, though, Fran, it all comes back to the money. The judges on the take, the political campaign contributions that are made to them, decisions that are being made behind closed doors, finding out in a case that there was a decision rendered where you weren't even present. And then you ask your lawyer. I've had to fire 2 lawyers for ineptitude. One was so corrupt, then he was so ashamed that I called him out. He didn't even send me the bill. I'm like, I'm not paying a penny to you. You did not do your job. Okay. So the bottom line is, yes, maybe some people say state by state, we need to put together a database of these judges, just like they have accountability for those pedophile priests, where you can look up, I used to say, what's wrong with my second husband? Something happened. And I started investigating and found out there was a pedophile chaplain in his high school who took vulnerable boys to his upstate home in Saratoga Springs. So how would I ever have found that out if someone hadn't made a disclosure that he taught at Archbishop Eloy High School in the 1980s, where victims' family members have come forward to me and said, Dorothy, my brother was in that class. There were 3 boys who committed suicide that year, 1985, in Queens, New York. So how do we bring it back to where we are right now? Again, accountability, disclosure, calling out these officials on their crimes. We pay for their salaries, their pensions, their benefits, their cars, and yet they're not held accountable. I think the time has come that we need to have officials arrested, and not just the DA prosecuting someone like Ed Mangano, but it's time for us to start filing police reports against judges, law clerks, CPS workers. The CPS worker who came to my home on December 18, 2018, and accused me of child neglect because I had not picked up my son from court. Guess what? I had been in a severe accident the night before and was getting 2 x-rays, sets of x-rays done on me. And Vicki knows this because her daughter is the one who drove me home from the hospital the next morning. I could hardly walk, but I proved in court February 2020, and I won that case. Do you know they accused me of doctoring or altering the medical records? And I said, then you go subpoena the Northwell Hospital Network. Here's the information on how to, so I'm doing the work for them. They didn't. You know why? Because I caught them in lies. And they actually took so much money, garnishment, that I'm now turning the tables on them as ready for this, everyone who's listening, I am the petitioner in family court, Nassau County. And I'll tell you right now, the Nassau County attorneys and the Department of Social Services representatives are always quiet on my calls because I call out the opposing attorney on his lies. He can't even get his facts straight. I don't know what he smoked before he came online. Let's just leave it at that. So I call them out. I have a lawyer now, and he's outside of the New York system, so they can't be bribed. Obviously, they can always try to bribe someone, but he's clean. He's won cases against Department of Social Services, and I will not stand for the corruption, the lies, the slander, the bribery, and stealing children, trafficking children, and then charging the protective parent. Are you kidding me? That's why I pray to God that Justina will win her $200 million lawsuit against Suffolk County, against Suffolk County Police, against so many Department of Social Services. They should fire everyone all the way up to the commissioner of New York State. Put all of them in jail. Killing children. Thankfully, God, my children are alive, and I, make sure and I raise them to be strong and look out for themselves. But this woman was an immigrant. They lied and said she had an alcohol problem. She did not. She went to the FBI. She went to the police. She tried to tell everyone how dangerous her husband is. And now her son, Tommy, is dead in the grave. All right. And she is, even after they did this to her son, Tommy, do you know that CPS showed up at her home in Nassau County unannounced to make sure? Are you kidding me? That she is one of the most amazing, protective moms with very deep spiritual faith that many people, I don't know, I probably would have crumbled. Her faith gets us through. You know that. Faith helped get me through. My family. I work with so many amazing men in my job. Shout out to those of you who are watching right now. And so many amazing men from Dartmouth and in my family. Men are great. There are many great men, but we need all of you men and all of you women who are watching. Go to your partner tonight. Ask them, what are you doing to help women? What are you doing to help children? Not stand by and say, oh, that's really, they'll always be evil. Don't throw up your hands and say they will always do evil. Actually go out and do something about it. That's the end of my soapbox speech.
Well, no, I mean, I agree so much. And, you know, and thank you and Vicky for the work that you guys do and have been doing for the years I've known you guys. I mean, it is mind blowing. I want to read something because it kind of just bounces off of what you just said. I mean, this is the case law. A parent's right to the preservation of his or her relationship with their child derives from the fact that the parent's achievement of a rich and rewarding life is likely to depend significantly on his ability to participate in the rearing of their offspring. A child's corresponding right to protection from interference in the relationship derives from the psychic, what we would say godly, psychic importance to him of being raised by a loving, let's make sure the ending is the most important, responsible, reliable adult. And that's why I always say that children fare better. There's no question. And I'm going to emphasize this until people finally get it. I believe in a two-parent household. I am a Christian. I believe in fathers and husbands very much. 100%. That's everything I believe in, actually. But children fare better and do better, and I know Vicky can vouch for this, in a one-parent, stable, safe home. They do not end up in jail. They do not end up in, shooting somebody in the streets. This happens to them when they go through the foster care system and they bounce from home to home, or that happens to them when they're in an abusive home with an abuser. Then they are going to end up in prison, jail, or jobless, homeless, all that stuff. When a loving mother and or father, unfortunately, are left single, okay, and they are raising children in a stable home environment, even if you're having a financial struggle and you're trying to get back on your feet again, and you're left alone by this despicable, diabolical, evil system, your children will do better and they will stabilize and they will get the healthy therapy that they need, counseling, Christian counseling, whatever they need to have a good home after something like a breakup has happened. We need the system to leave people alone. Okay, we need to rise up and fight. In 20, I think it was 17, 18, I did the first citizens arrest day. And no, we did not hog tie people. We did not, hog tie people. What we did is we did a and now you should do it for real, okay? But we did we did not put gas in our cars. We did not shop online or in stores, whether it was Walmart or Louis Vuitton. Okay, we didn't go grocery shopping. We arrested the nation to get the attention, and a lot of news media picked it up in different states. And we've done a lot of different things. The other thing is that, like, if you guys, I'm sure you've seen it because Danny's played it repeatedly on CBS News Network. The 2019, where I spoke before the New York State Assembly. I mean, it's there. It's clearly there. It tells you exactly what's happening. Their own statistics is what I used against them. They are indeed child trafficking. It is the judges. Do you know that when I spoke this out at Senator Serino's the day before, I spoke this out when she was supporting the bill to end child trafficking, and it was her statistics. I got the statistics from the children's home that constantly in lawsuits for molesting children and hurting them. But I got those statistics from them. They didn't want to talk to me after that. A man actually lunged at me. He literally wanted to attack me. People surrounded me and supported what I was saying. This is serious, guys. This is serious. You do not touch their child trafficking industry. They will call you a deceit. They will call you a liar. They will say that you're mentally ill. They will say that you are a sovereign citizen. They will say that you're in the cult if you go against their lying, deceptive child trafficking industry. And I will continue to keep trumping this message. I do believe that we need to do a genuine now citizens arrest. There are ways that we can do it. I will work more with Vicky and with Dorothy and others, okay? Because these diabolical, evil, whatever they are, inhumans need to go down, and this system needs to be abolished. Judge, what is her name? Judge Janet DeFiore. What a joke. Shame on her. Shame on her. These people are disgraceful. These judges, these child attorneys. I thought Amy Ingram, guys, look her up, Amy Ingram. I thought she was like a horror story on wheels. I mean, anytime my son was in danger, she just pretended it wasn't happening and it was as obvious as the day was long. And she's one of millions of them all over they're trained to be psychopaths, basically. They are trained sociopaths. Go ahead.
I think it is, because I work on Wall Street and we have regulations, and obviously there's been a lot of bribery and so forth. But if you don't have a control framework and accountability, escalation, and you can't trust that highest level, it wasn't until the Department of Justice went into Spoda and McPartland and Jimmy Burke and listened to the victims, listened to and there were people within the ranks of the Suffolk County Police Department who had to go and testify against what Jimmy Burke, running the Suffolk County Police Department like a mafia thug. That's exactly what he did. Now, the judges, if they say where, there is immunity, we talk about that. They talk about we can't be arrested. So power corrupts, and absolute power absolutely corrupts. Again, there's no accountability. There's no escalation pattern. It wasn't until about 3 weeks ago that I filed a complaint against an 18B attorney who I literally witnessed in court telling lies, slander, and then called his manager, Robert Nitro, who runs the 18B lawyer program for Nassau County, found out that he's a vendor to the Nassau County Bar Association. But what kind of background check was done on him? I mean, we all know that pedophiles operate among us. And Babylon High School, there are at least 5 male Babylon teachers who have been removed from the teaching staff. And that's an investigation now that New York State Attorney General Letitia James has declared that she is also investigating. I don't know where the FBI is in this, but again, it all comes down to, unless you have a framework of governance, investigation, remediation, and then proper prosecution, these individuals will continue with their crimes. And that means filing what they do every day. It's filing false reports against parents with no evidence. That go after the individuals who have filed false reports. They can never want anyone to suffer. Well, my family has suffered because Jenna Weefa, a CPS worker in Nassau County, filed a false report against me that it took me 1 year for the court system to finally give me my day in court. 1 year while my son is suffering, my daughter. Can you imagine ripping twins from each other? The bottom line is my son came forward. He said, Mom, I made copies of evidence. I made copies of some of the DSS employees' emails. I know that you'll need these. My son is amazing.
If I could
Go ahead, Vicki.
Okay. Everything both of you said is absolutely supported by research, by the way, empirical research about how even a single mother home without abuse is better than a 2-parent home if there's abuse. And there is so much research out there that courts need to start considering, and that I believe that first of all, it would also help to file a major class action lawsuit, because we need some kind of a huge movement. God knows there's more of us than them, and this is reaching the tipping point. The research shows that when it comes to childhood trauma, children's brains are not developed until they're 25. And there's the neurobiology of trauma and the development of the brain. And when children are either exposed to trauma, there's an impact of the emotional, behavioral, cognitive, and physical functioning of children, but also their resilience. What they teach you in social, when I was getting my master's in social work, resilience. Okay, you cannot prevent all the things that can go wrong in this world, but it can increase a person's resilience. They can weather much more. We are destroying the resilience of children. We are destroying the resilience of mother. And there's research out there by Joan Meyer, who was a professor at George Washington University Law School, an attorney, and it's titled "Mapping Gender: Shedding Empirical Light on Family Court's Treatment of Cases Involving Abuse and Alienation." And this is real. The research confirms it, and like Dorothy said, and you said, it's all tied to child trafficking, which is moving children around and making money, which is what the courts are doing as well.
Sorry, absolutely. I just muted myself. Absolutely, absolutely. And it's been, excuse me, it's been, like I said, it's been so many years of this. And I believe that, obviously, it takes a lot to get us to the point where we take it down. Education is one of the ways, exposing them is one of the ways, going after their finances right now is something we're doing. Excuse me. I know that I said that, excuse me, let me just take a drink. I know that I said that, like, a lot of them are deeply involved. The FBI, there's a lot of people deeply involved. They do these fake investigations, the Department of Justice. But there's been some things I just want to say. I'm not being contradictory, but I do want to say we've been filing a lot of non-compliance complaints to the Department of Justice. I have stopped pounding with the FBI, but with the Department of Justice, and I have found, and I don't know if you saw this, Vicki, I think I sent it to you, but they did increase the from the audits that are being done from the what I've been filing for families. I am seeing, like, the unified court system. They are doing audits. I just want you guys to know that. So every time I do a non-compliance complaint for somebody, know that even if you don't see instant results, it's doing something on a greater scale. Okay. We have to keep holding them accountable, and we have to keep pounding at this. Okay. But I also noticed that if you look on the unified court system now, they've expanded the ADA, and it's talking about the psychological injury. It's talking about, so there's been some change, and we're going to keep going strong because there's not enough change, obviously, but there's been some change in the right direction. Also, when I get into these courts, I do have some of the ones that are so archaic and behind the times that they're like, don't practice law without a license nonsense. I literally laugh in their face. I want to spit in their face, but I laugh in their face. But, I do have judges that are saying, thank you for Miss Amato being here. Thank you, because what she's saying is correct. And no, she can speak for the client. She can support the client. She is here. I'm not practicing law without a license. It is so ridiculous. I have
You're
to be
not.
able to communicate with the court. There's no other way to communicate with the court. If we don't understand law, we cannot follow it. We have to understand it so we can follow it. It's common sense. These are common practices. Okay. So we have to, we know more than they do. We know more than they
Right.
do.
Yes,
Okay.
the judges don't know the ADA. The ones who either know a little bit about it or take your word for it as an ADA advocate and expert, they, in those cases, your clients are lucky. But from what I've seen is it's just there's the law, the policies exist, the DOJ regulations exist, but the courts do not. They just apply their own interpretation to it. And when it's wrong, the DOJ is supposed to step in, but there aren't enough DOJ agents out there. So we are out there. And when we say something, the ADA allows for an advocate to speak for their for the person who is a protected class member.
Absolutely. And I do it all the time. And the other thing is that when I say we know more than they do as experts, but just even lay people sometimes, I mean it not just for the ADA too. Okay. I know more. I know every nook and cranny, inside out, front and back door, roof, ceiling, and everything in these courts, and what they're going to do, because everything they do is to cover up their crimes. And we have to remember that we got to keep that in the forefront of our brain. Okay. What they're doing is to cover up their crimes. These are crimes against humanity. I don't want to mince words. It is what it is. And it's very important that we speak about it as to what it is. One dead child, one abused child, one hurt child, one child taken from their family. Okay. One child traumatically harmed, triggered, traumatized is more than enough. One child. This is happening to multiple thousands. Go ahead, Dorothy.
Let's say that I am a money manager, okay? And I'm managing $500 million for clients around the globe, all right? And my clients start dropping out because they go to commodities index, they want volatility, what have you. I need to keep the pipeline going with new clients so I can pay for my office, I can pay for my staff, I can pay my taxes. That is exactly what's happening. They need a pipeline of children in the system, CPS, foster care, to keep their criminal cabal operating. All the foster homes, all the group homes. We have Timothy Hill, Houghton, Riverhead. There's Mercy First and Syosset, where kids are constantly running away. Yes, those kids have issues. Yes, those children have family homes which may be unstable. However, Where are these judges and Department of Social Service workers when the law, family law, and CPS policy specifically state that reconciliation and providing services to children and their families, for example, therapy, family therapy, doing fun things together, helping the children heal, for example, if they were abandoned by the first parent, dealing with teenagers who are caught up in drugs trafficking, which, by the way, doesn't just happen in Harlem, Bronx, Brooklyn. It also happens in towns like Manhasset. I brought the DEA in because it was getting so bad with the teenage boys that the police weren't doing anything, narcotics officers. So finally I had to call the feds in. So yes, do you really think I wanted to do that as a resident of Manhasset? But I did. And people thanked me. At the beginning, they were nervous. They were scared. But I'm not going to allow organized crime, narcotics trafficking, including cocaine and heroin, to take another life of a child and or adult in Manhasset. So the gatekeeper. Bottom line is that we know that this system has to continue to bring children into it to operate. And that's where reform comes in. 500, let me say for a second, 500 million. Yes, Nassau County Department of Social Services is around $500 million budget. And I can prove to you where there's waste. There's
Absolutely.
Even the investigations unit doesn't do their job properly. They don't investigate. They never investigated my case. It took me a year, and now I'm going to federal. And I'm not going to tell you how much it is, but suffice to say that there are whistleblowers like Justina who have gone before. And they go after women who are on welfare because, like you said, they're getting federal money and state money and all the nonprofit money. There are so many nonprofits and companies and big Cablevision, other companies that have funded these entities for children. And when you try to confront them, for example, one last thing I'm going to say, Anna Kaplan, our former councilwoman for Manhasset, she's now state assembly. Her staff ran a presentation on human trafficking. And I wrote in the comments, where is the channel of trafficking children through Department of Social Services, including foster care? You left that out. They don't want to know about it because their pockets are being lined.
Absolutely.
And they also want to be reelected. That's the whole point. And those who are behind it all will ensure that they're not, and they'll put their own people in there.
Vicki, touch on real quick before we wrap it up. With legal abuse syndrome now has been, it's now accepted and acknowledged. And thank you for reminding me about that, Anne. She put that in comments. Let's talk about that a little bit, because obviously, for anybody that doesn't understand, legal abuse syndrome is PTSD. It's caused by the courts, right? So can you touch on that?
Absolutely. I mean, PTSD is a physiological injury that occurs in the brain that is actually visible on SPECT, SPECT scans that shows a diamond pattern. The whole concept of PTSD originated when the veterans came back and they could see the diamond pattern on their brain. Well, when it comes to going through a contested case, they'll say, well, what's so traumatic about that? You didn't see someone fall out of a building or murdered. Or no, but you know what? Suddenly your whole life is on the line. You may lose your children. You may lose your home. You may be thrown in jail. You are accused of mental illness. And your life is being destroyed by a court system. And that's what legal abuse is. It's using the legal system in a manner that it was not intended for, to, for lack of a better word, win your case. And it's all tactical. And when it comes to family, for the family, okay, children and your civil rights, it's very traumatic. And legal abuse syndrome is another word for PTSD, which develops from trauma. And your brain gets triggered every time you have to go to court, or if you open your mail, you're afraid of being served, or you have to go back because you're not of a contempt, or your attorney is not being honest with the judge and just wants to settle the case. And it's very traumatic. And legal abuse syndrome is a form of PTSD that is developing from family and matrimonial courts, and it's become a national epidemic. And it ties into the Title II of the ADA, because if you have PTSD, it is a recognized disability. You're a protected class member entitled to accommodations, and not just that, but you are protected from something called a direct threat risk to you. And, PTSD under other laws, let's say you have, I think it's called the eggshell defense, where a person, they are already viewed as having a pre-existing condition, and they're very vulnerable to trauma. Well, when you have someone who already has PTSD or has anxiety or depression, and then you go through this court system with legal abuse, it violates the ADA, because the courts are not allowed to provide a service that poses a direct threat, and they're supposed to not have provide any service, which a trial is, a lawsuit hearing is, judgment of orders, civil, rights enforcement orders, whether they're family court or matrimonial. They are not allowed to have a disparate impact on a person with disabilities. And I think triggering your brain injury is disparate impact for sure. And we need to get the DOJ in on this. They have to start.
It's quite sad too, Vicky, because it's like, the work that you've done, the work that I've done with regards to it. And like I can't help but think of, when you're talking, I can't help but think of Andy Gilday, the attorney, like mocking me and telling me that he knew better than we did, he knew better than you. And the fact that because I'm articulate, I don't have PTSD.
Oh, yes. And because I didn't sign something, just printed my name, that disqualified me.
Coming from somebody that's a drunk, but anyway, irregardless, and that doesn't know I don't even say, but I'm going to wrap this. I want to thank you guys so much. I really, really appreciate you. I'd like to bring you guys back on again at another time, and I'm going to be bringing in Megan Walsh. She'll be doing more, and of course, I'm going to be bringing in Minister Lewis Arthur, who is saving children literally at the border from the child trafficking cartel. I mean, what more can we ask for? But I believe that if we continue to pool our resources together, if we continue to work together, there's a lot we can accomplish. I can't believe how long this has taken. Yes, I just found out today, I had a new client this morning, and she told me the reason. I said, how did you hear from me? Because you saved my friend's children. She got them back. So, and it's a wonderful thing. So I don't want to sound like negative, like that's not my goal. Obviously we have to tell the ugly with it all, because there's so much ugly, but it's a nice thing to know. And I don't say this anything but humble. Okay. But we've saved more children than most lawyers do. It tells you a lot.
Absolutely, you have. Absolutely,
There's no question, including my own. I've had to save twice. So, it's torture what they put people through. Dorothy knows full well, what families have been put through. It is absolutely sick. And we have to fight while we're being tortured. Literally, we have to fight for ourselves and others while we're being tortured. If you can make it through this, you can make it through anything.
Right. Or we're maintaining a full-time job, or you have to be focused. I have to be in bed a certain hour because I have to get up, make that 4:43 a.m. train to go work for Dun & Bradstreet in New Jersey. And then getting phone calls, being pulled off the desk. Oh, CPS called, this called, the police called. Like, stop this harassment. You're harassing me. You're preventing me from earning money for my children as a single mom, because the government can't do their job to collect the child support enforcement. But yet, if I don't have an expensive lawyer, but the bottom line is, yes, Vicki has taught me so much as well about ADA. Thank you so much. I work for another firm, so I don't work with Fran, full disclosure, but I wanted to say thank you to both Vicki and Fran for helping me on my case, because I won in February 2020, and we're in the second stage now, and then third stage moving on. So everyone out there, good luck with all of your cases. Stay strong. Be good to yourself, give yourself that extra time, go for a walk in nature. Make sure that you network with other people, because that's actually how I found my lawyer now, through my Goldman Sachs network. So thank you.
Oh, and thank you both also. Thank you, Dorothy. Thank you, Vicki. I'm sorry. Thank you, Fran, for all you do. And the three of us are warriors, and I know that we're not stopping until we see change and this stops. And I think there are a lot of other people out there too, and we need to all band together.
I'm laughing because you said thank you, Vicki, which is funny to me because, ironically, I don't know if you guys remember, I was so, I wish I could play it now, but I was so upset when I was invited to speak back at the the blue ribbon, obviously with regard to Jacqueline Franchetti, who I support 100%, but I was very articulate and very detailed in the statistics and so on. The first time I got invited to speak, the second time I think they gave me I don't remember what it was, 5 minutes, and I did it in 3, and I just basically told everybody off, because what happens is that you and then on top of it, I forgot what I said. I was getting triggered while I was doing the speech, and I said I saw it with my own 2 ears. So when you said thank you, Vicky, I thought of that, because it is true. This is a manifestation of the and we can laugh at ourselves, but this is a manifestation of what happens with PTSD when when you're thinking of the damages. I literally read a portion of my book the other day. I opened it up, my book, and I was sending somebody some pictures of the part where I have scripture, and how sometimes people, you feel like God is against you, or you're asking why, and you're at your wit's end. And so I wanted to send that because we can all relate to that, and then we know that at the end of the day that God is good and he loves us, and despite what's happening, there's a reason he has us as warriors in this. But I went, after I got done sending that yesterday, and I went and I just read a portion of when my son came home in 2018, and I just bawled. I literally cried for a half hour straight. And I was like, wow, I haven't even read my own book, and this is how many years later, and what it does to you. You never quite, I don't think, ever really get over the injury that it causes you. And because I do this every day, 25/8, I should say, and traumatically and vicariously, suffering trauma from other people's cases, because I really care about everybody's children. I care about everybody's children, and your children and my children, affect it affects each other. It affects our neighborhoods. It affects our communities. It affects our country. What they're doing to our families affects us all. We should all be in this fight together. Okay. And people that don't think they're being affected are being affected. I say this every day. You may not ever have walked into a family court, but somebody in your family or your neighbor, or maybe I've said it before, little Johnny across the street was just taken, and maybe your son, and you live across the street and you've never dealt with family court, used to play with little Johnny. So they had a friendship they were building as kids, and the innocence of childhood is robbed. And that is so important, because the innocence of childhood, that is something that I really want to start talking a lot about. Children have had their innocence robbed. Children should be innocent children. Children should be protected children. Children, we talk so much about what's happening, but do we understand? And I know it's hard to look at, that the innocence of a child is being robbed. They're supposed to develop. They're supposed to feel protected. They're supposed to be safe, and their innocence gets robbed, and they get thrown into adulthood a lot of times. They get thrown into situations they should have never been through. If you really love your children, okay, and you really do love your children, stay the hell out of family court. Stay out of family court, okay, because you don't love them if you walk into family court. And the only time I say that you have no choice and you have to fight in family court is because somebody stole them in family court. Okay. But other than that, do not go to family court. Do not. There's a better way to do it.
But the problem is that if there is an incident at home where one person calls the police, with CPS immediately gets involved. I'm at the point, don't call the police. Have a network of people to come over if your child is acting out or if you find drugs. But it's so hard to tell someone that, right? Don't call the police. I found out personally, the police were not on my side. The police were buddies with my husband, and they didn't want me to sniff around what they were doing. Not suffice. I can't.
Absolutely.
Yeah, what do we get? Don't call the police, right? Because I don't want a social worker. I'm going to have a social worker coming. The problem is, as soon as you start that gateway to hell, you open that gateway to hell, it's money, 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 money. And it's not good money. It's not good money that's being invested to pay for your child's education in 529, or invested in your 401k so you can have a better retirement. This is purely evil money that's going through these networks. And Bank of America, by the way, is the bank of Department of Social Services New York, for the record.
Amen. And thank you. And I want to read this. I like to always end these lives with something, and it seems like somebody always puts in a good word at the end. And so I'm going to end it with this today. And I thank my guests, Vicki Gribbin and Dorothy Hill, for being here. But I want to leave it with Kim B's what she said here. God's word says Satan will wear out the saints, but God's grace is sufficient. We are more than conquerors with his help. And let's remember that we are more than conquerors. So guys,
Amen.
thank you so much. And thank you for being here. And thank you, audience, for watching. Don't forget to like, don't forget to subscribe, don't forget to hit the bell, and don't forget to share. Thank you so much.